Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jared Hornbeck, a podcast host who was, in fact, conceived at a petting zoo. But don't get near my void, because this void is only big enough for two of us. And who is my other half who is joining me?
You stole both of my intros. Yeah, I had two intros lined up because I'm like, I knew we were going to be aligned on at least one of them, and then you sniped the other one. Well, you went into my void, is what I'm saying, and you just can't do that. This is the podcast. Oh, I'm Steve Guntley, by the way. And this is the podcast. It's all about imp-splaining, spy bears, and baloney. That's because this is a podcast about sorority babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama 2, a sequel nearly 30 years in the making, directed by one of its original stars. And we know that because they just might happen to be on the call with us today. We are nerding out in a huge, huge way. Why is that, Jared? Why are we nerding so very hard today?
Well, there's multiple reasons why I'm nerding out so much right now. One of those is because we're talking about sorority babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama 2, which is a movie that, by our standards, is pretty new. And so there's not a lot written about it. It's one of those ones where it's like, if we're going to do a whole episode about this, we got to go to the source. And we wanted to bring in like a source and an expert. So we actually have two guests with us today, and I'm going to introduce them separately, which isn't something I normally do. Our first guest that we have here is a published author, a teacher, a doctor, the first doctor, I believe, that we've had on the show. But even more importantly than all of those credentials, self-proclaimed sorority babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama expert, Dr. Rhonda Baughman. Rhonda, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this movie. I've only met one other person who dubbed themselves a sorority babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama expert, and that was friend of the show, Ted Gagan. But he's not a doctor, so I think he's been usurped. Rhonda, thanks for joining us.
Hello. It's good to be here.
Oh, we're so glad to have you.
Good to have you. Yeah, and so excited because our second guest is not only the director of this particular movie that we're going to talk about, but just a legendary scream queen from the 80s, 90s, and beyond, star of so many movies like the first Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama, Nightmare Sisters, and one of my all-time favorite movies that I might happen to be wearing a t-shirt of, Slumber Party Massacre. 300 plus IMDb credits to her name, the one and only Brinke Stevens. Brinke, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, this is so cool for us to have both of you here. This is really awesome. We've watched many of your movies at this point. I was trying to figure out which ones we had all covered. I know a personal favorite of mine is Delta Delta Die, which is just a really, really fun time. But we did talk about the original Sorority Babes, and we talked about Witch House 3 recently, a handful of others. You're all over the history of this show, so it's really
Slave
cool
Girls from Beyond Infinity,
which we loved. Yeah. I mean, you're all over this history, so we're really excited, and we're really excited to talk to someone with much more context and expertise on this franchise than I think any of us can boast to. So I'm really excited to have both of you here to help us cover this.
Absolutely.
Great. We're ready to go.
I'm ready.
Well, let's do it. I want to start with let's start with Rhonda here, because we like to ask our guests what are kind of what was your background with B horror movies? When did you get into it? What was your first kind of breakthrough moment with these sort of movies? And why has it continued to be kind of an enduring fascination?
And when did you change your major to Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama?
Yeah, because I know Caltech is offering that program now in Slimeball studies. So yeah, that's.
Oh my goodness. I would write that curriculum in a heartbeat.
Right? Yeah.
I was really young, honestly. Probably around 9, maybe 10 max. We had a local video chain called Video Time Video, and I had my own little card, and my grandparents would just drop me off there, and I'd like, just let me be, okay? I have to stare at these box covers. So also, I'm an only child, if that tells you. I had many hours by myself to look at these box covers, and I kept returning to Sorority Babes over and over again until I finally realized, wait, the women in this film are the women in the other films I've been watching, Nightmare Sisters, for Linnea as well, also in Return of the Living Dead, several others. So every time I would go in there, I would rent Sorority Babes. I don't even want to guess how many times. It's literally, I'm not embarrassed, but it's more like, I can't believe my grandparents, my parents put up with this. But wait, it gets better, because about a year of just watching this film nonstop, I realized I could join the Brinke Stevens fan club. Oh, yes, I could.
Yeah.
And it was my father that's like, if I give you money to join this fan club, can you stop talking about this movie just for like 5 minutes? Please give us peace. So I started writing to Brinke really young. And then one day, this beautiful letter, handwritten in a script I will never forget. And I still have this letter. It arrived from her personally, thanking me for being the youngest member of her fan club and sending me a picture. And I think I carried this thing around for like a year before everyone's like, that's great, Rhonda. We've heard this story at least twice. So I have a lot of supportive family to thank back then and now for supporting, anything I really have an interest in regards to B movies.
That's awesome. That's very similar to we had a guest, Erin, on our show who talked about the first two Beach Babes from Beyond movies. And she told the story too about how she started like a pen pal correspondence with Linnea Quigley. And like, it's really funny. I think it was the same thing. It was like, I just decided on a whim, I'm going to, join a fan club and write to this person. And that's just such a great story to hear of those kind of personal correspondences. Brinke, you don't have to raise your hand. You can just talk.
Okay. I just wanted to say that Rhonda is such a dear. She was my youngest fan at age 9, and her father actually brought her to a convention to meet me in person. And we started up this correspondence, which continued over the years. And I think of her as the daughter I never had, because we're into the same thing. She's made her own movies as an actress. We were both involved in education, teaching and things like that. And we both love B movies.
Yeah.
So, she's the perfect companion over the years.
That's amazing. I mean, yeah, that's so cool that you guys were able to kind of build that connection through that unlikely channel. That's super cool. I mean, it sounds like you have a very similar origin story to Jared and I. We were video store kids as well, who just like to be dropped off, and we could wander around and read all these boxes. And man, a movie called Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama just jumps off the shelf. It just brands itself into your brain.
It does.
Like, years before I saw it, I knew that movie. And I'm like, that sounds like, I mean, what a title. That is so promising so much.
A 1-2 punch for me of around the time that I was maybe like 10, I was really into Nightmare on Elm Street. That was kind of the first franchise I really got head over heels into. And one of the stars of Nightmare 4 was in Sorority Babes and Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama, the first one. And I remember he has a strange name, and I remember seeing his name in print. And this was one of my biggest influences when I was young was my mom's cousin, and he bought me Michael Weldon's Psychotronic video guide book. And I saw Andres Jones's name in there. And I said, oh, that's the guy from Nightmare 4. He's in other movies. What movie is this that he's in? Wait a minute. This movie is called Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama. And then I think around the same time, I saw the VHS artwork as well. And I was like, and I think it also may have been premiering or playing for the umpteenth time on USA Up All Night or something at the same time, because I was just like, all right, the stars are aligning, and I have to seek this movie out and find it. And it's just been one in the amazing movie title sweepstakes. And Brinke, you happen to be in like a couple of them, like Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity, Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama. I mean
such
Bad Girls
incredible.
From Mars.
Bad Girls from Mars.
This was the 80s, and it was our primary audience was college age males. So movies had really weird titles. And I think Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity, it just started with a title. And Charlie Band said, okay, I like that title, make a movie about it. And Sorority Babes was originally called The Imp when I was cast in it, which was quite respectable. And in England, they still had the box cover. It was The Imp. But it was a little embarrassing, Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama, but at least it wasn't Hollywood chainsaw hookers.
Listen,
Another
we do not
Stone
disparage
classic.
Fred Olin Ray on this show.
Oh no, I've worked with Fred many times, and
Yeah.
I have to say I have such great respect for Charles Band because he continues to turn out product for the last 40 years. It's amazing. Fred Olin Ray has done movies recently for Charlie, so has Jim Wynorski. But for the most part, the people I used to work for in the 80s and 90s, Fred Olin Ray, Dave Dakota, Jim Wynorski, ended up doing Christmas movies for Hallmark and completely got out of the genre. But Charlie keeps turning them out. So my respect to him. He's found the formula and he stayed in a very difficult business and remained timely.
Yeah, he's still plugging away. His work ethic is really incredible, as we've come to appreciate over the years. Now, Brinke, I was just curious, how did you first join this particular circus? How did you first kind of cross paths with Charlie Band and kind of get involved in these films?
Well, I came to Hollywood in the early 80s, and my first movie was Slumber Party Massacre. We shot it in 81.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, right. and weirdly, to this day, 300 movies later, they still say, and Brinke Stevens, star of Slumber Party Massacre. So my first movie is still the one I'm most known for.
Wow.
And I got quickly typecast in horror movies. That was pretty much all the work I could get. I was a big fish in a small pond with the horror movies, but I also worked on Psycho 3 with Tony Perkins. I was in Spinal Tap for Rob Reiner.
Oh, wow.
I did Three Amigos with John Landis. So I had small parts in big movies.
Brinke, you might not believe me if I tell you this, but I think I did remember that because I think you have a small involvement in Psycho 3 and Kat Shea is in Psycho 3 also. And Psycho 3 is one of my other favorite movies that I actually have a t-shirt of. And like Slumber Party Massacre, I have the soundtrack on vinyl also. Just when you said Psycho 3, I didn't bring that up, but like Steve could tell you, I love Psycho 3 and I talk about it a lot and I have it on a t-shirt that I wear all the time.
You're kind of like the Inspector Gadget with these t-shirts. You have one for every occasion. You just pop them out for anything, and that in vinyl records is pretty impressive.
I'm right there with you with the vinyl.
Yeah,
my signed copy of Slumber Party. But I'm waiting for Sorority Babes on vinyl for the soundtrack. I'm waiting. Yeah. I'm ready. I will be first in line.
I mean, that is a fantastic soundtrack.
Like, and that opening song, Here in the Darkness. That's so good. It's really catchy.
I'm so glad you were able to bring over so much of the music from the first one into the sequel all these years later, because it was so fun to hear those again and just kind of the general like perfectly 80s vibe that you captured in the new movie.
We did.
Go ahead, Brinke. I was just going to say, I don't think you were attached to Assault of the Killer Bimbos in any way, but the song that plays at the end of Sorority Babes 2 is the song from the opening credits of Assault of the Killer Bimbos. One of my favorite songs in any movie we've covered so far. I was smiling from ear to ear when it started playing.
Me too, Jerry. Do you have Assault of the Killer Bimbos on vinyl? Because I have Assault of the Killer Bimbos on vinyl.
No, see, you've got one up on me because when we did that episode, our guest Becky Dark had never even heard of the movie and she ended up loving it. And we talked about the special feature with Elizabeth Caton hawking the merchandise for the movie. And I said, I need to find either the red I'm a Killer Bimbo tank top or the red button, like the big pin that says I'm a Killer Bimbo. And so I'm still waiting for that one fan of the show to somehow find my mailing address and get it to me. I don't have that one.
Out. I'm going to bolo that for you, for me, for the both of us.
Much appreciated.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the movie today. I've got some stats I can drop about this, and then y'all could sort of help us fill in some of the gaps here. Now, Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama 2, I see that was released on December 2nd, 2022, directed by Brinke Stevens, written by Kent Fudabush, and it stars Kelly Maroney, Gloria Rodriguez, Jesse Gill, Audrey Neal, Katie O'Neill, Hannah Tullett, Justin Lupo, Michelle Bauer, and Brinke Stevens. back again as Taffy. So this movie was announced as part of a new initiative from Full Moon that was called the Deadly 10. And I think this was the gimmick behind this, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that it was 10 movies that Charlie Band announced that they were going to be basically live streaming the production of. Sort of a cool way of sort of bringing you into the making of the movie. And I think a lot of those streams ended up getting disrupted by the pandemic, and a lot of the movies wound up being delayed. And I'm not sure if the Deadly 10 label is still being used or if that as a specific project has been abandoned, but most of the movies announced under the Deadly 10 have been released in some form or another. I think the only one we're still waiting on is Bride of the Head of the Family. But I think everything else did get released. Am I getting that timeline right?
Yes. Yes, you're right. Charlie first contacted me, I think in 2019, about doing the sequel. And it was one of the Deadly 10. And then COVID happened and everything got delayed. So it took a much longer time. We didn't shoot until 2 years ago, 2022. So, COVID derailed everything, but that was the original concept. And they did have a crew there that did some live streaming, but, it wasn't exactly the same as they had originally intended.
Sure. Yeah, it seems like a cool idea. It is a fun kind of innovative way of bringing people in on this. Now,
Charlie just put a camera in like a stuffed monkey in the corner.
It's just there the whole time. Now, I'm curious how you came to be the director of this movie, because according to your IMDb, at least, you'd only done like one kind of short film for Tiny Terrors before this. Was this something that you were looking to get into, or was this just sort of an offer out of the blue that you had to jump on?
Well, after shooting so many movies, hundreds of them, I always felt like I could be a good director. And I was offered a number of times to be a director, but it always fell through for one reason or another, either COVID or financing dropped out or whatever. I did direct Personal Demons on the Terror Tunes 4 anthology, which is a 36-minute short that I wrote, directed, and starred in. So back in 2019, I get a phone call from Charlie Band. And he said, "Hey, Brink, I'm doing a sequel to Sorority Babes." And I'm like, "So why are you telling me this? I died in the first movie." And he says, No, I want you to direct it. And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Hey.
So it took a few years before it actually happened. But I was dispatched to Cleveland, Ohio, to this 1930 mansion in Cleveland Heights that Charlie had bought it, and they shot many movies there. So they painted all the walls pink for the sorority. And I arrived in late August of 2022. And I spent a week on pre-production, and then filming started. The actors had arrived. We're staying largely at the house. And we shot it in 6 days, plus an additional few hours in Los Angeles with Michelle and I playing ghosts. It was just kind of nice that they put us in there in a cameo.
Yeah, that was really
6
fun.
days. That's impressive.
That's short even for a full moon movie. Yeah.
It wasn't, I don't think it was a completely full length thing, but Charlie's got the streaming channels and he just constantly needs product. So it's like a factory where you turn it up very quickly. And Billy Butler was my producer on it. And he had already done like 6 movies so far that year by August. They just did them really fast, cranking them out. So it was tough for me. It was trial by fire, trying to first-time director and get it all done in 6 days. We had hoped for 10-hour shooting days, but then it was 12 hours, then 14 hours. We had a 16-hour shooting day. Just trying to get the material done. And it was tough for me. But when it was over, I thought, wow, I'd do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, is there any plans in motion to do it again anytime soon?
No, not as far as I know from Charles Band. However, I got a phone call last week from a filmmaker I've worked with many times, Jason Paul Collum. And he called me up to say, look, I'm going to pitch Sorority Babes 3 to Charlie. And
Wow.
I want to write it and direct it, and I just want to make sure that you're okay with that. That I wouldn't direct it, that Jason would direct it. And I
Mhm.
said, be my guest if he says yes on this. So the basic idea, I can't give away the plot, but some kids know that the imp is in the bowling alley, and they deliberately break in to get the imp to get some wishes, thinking they know more than the imp does. And Michelle and I would make a reprisal as ghosts in the
Oh,
bowling alley.
amazing.
Yeah, so I would be in the third one. So I really hope that Charles Band says yes on that one.
I
And
mean,
green
yeah.
light.
Please say yes, Charlie.
Yes.
Jason,
Yeah,
go for it.
People at home can't see that Rhonda was doing a happy dance when Sorority Babes 3 was spoken. So I can say that you're on board with the concept of more of these. Yeah, that's
Well, Rhonda's looking to go back to school, so she needs something to, she needs a new program to get
It's a
into.
continuing education credit. That's
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's all going on to the CV. It's perfect.
When 30 years had gone by since the original movie. So I said to Charlie, why do you want to remake Sorority Babes? It was a perfect little movie. The actors were wonderful. Dave Dakota at the time was 24 years old, but he was such a good director. And the movie has really high production value. The first one, they flip a car, they light a guy on fire. It was incomparable. So I said, why do you want to redo this? And he said, well, I want to introduce a whole new generation to this movie, which makes a lot of sense. But it's, also fodder for the machine.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, they own the title. Why not take advantage of it?
Absolutely.
So even though it was 30 years later, we tried to do that 1980s sensibility. And our makeup artist, Greg Leitner, had to completely reproduce the imp from scratch because the original one had fallen apart by then. And he only had frame grabs from the television set of the original imp and had to create it from scratch just based on frame grabs on the television.
Oh wow, that's really cool. I mean, I really did love the look of this movie. I had to keep double checking what year this came out because I'm like, you nailed like the old fashioned kind of vibe of the Sorority Babes 1, which was a really cool stylistic choice, and I think that worked really well. I definitely I had a blast with this movie. I had not seen it before, so we were going into this pretty blind. I had such a good time with this. I was laughing out loud at multiple parts in this movie. I think it's so silly and so fun. Now, Rhonda,
I'm glad you liked it.
Absolutely.
When it first came out, the critics were all fairly kind to me. They said that I did a good job. And I felt like, given the limitations I had, lack of time and money, that I did the best job I was capable of. And of course, there's a lot of naysayers out there that go, oh, this movie's terrible. But you can't please everyone. No movie gets, 100% great reviews. And I think you just have to accept it for what it is, that it was a very quick thing. And Billy Butler was a wonderful producer where he was responsible for the look of the movie. And he got all those great costumes, bought them online and decorated the sorority and found the bowling alley and things like that. So a lot of the beauty of it was thanks to Billy Butler.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, it looks fantastic. Rhonda, as a Sorority Babes super fan, were you doing a similar happy dance when you learned that like part 2 was on its way? Did you get involved in this? Were you and Brinke had known each other, right, for a while at this point, right? So did you have the inside scoop?
I had a few scoops, not the scoop. She's very good at, doing exactly, as a director, playing it close to the vest. But when I got the email that said, hey, Rhonda, it's a go, and we're coming to Cleveland, I'm pretty sure that folks in LA could probably hear me, my gleeful expression, we'll call it, which was even worse than the dance you just saw like 5 minutes ago. And I'm not saying that I built my entire life around their shooting schedule, in case I got to go to Cleveland, but I probably built my entire life around that shooting schedule so I could get to Cleveland.
Yeah. All right. All right.
Rhonda lives in Ohio, so she was maybe an hour away. And
perfect.
I was so happy to be able to invite her to the set because Rhonda had already met me, Linnea, Andrus, Hal Haven. She'd met a lot of the actors in the first movie. And so we all went out to dinner one night, and Rhonda was included, and she got to meet Billy Butler, the producer.
And who doesn't, remember Billy Butler fondly, even if maybe we had a little crush. See, I can say that now that William is not in the room, watching him in, the 1990 Night of the Living Dead. And man, can that guy spin a tale. Like
that book. Yeah, his book is amazing.
Storyteller. His book is great. He is great. As far as producing goes, had I, not been a fangirl at the dinner, I'd have been like, wow, this guy makes me want to be a producer. And eventually I would go on to just attach my name to a few projects. I'm not saying that was because I wanted to be cool like Butler, but yeah, I kind of wanted to be cool like Butler.
Why not?
Yeah, he's one that he's on our short list of people to contact soon, where many people have said, oh, he's a guy you have to have on.
Oh, he's so funny. He's got this very sarcastic wit, and his book is extraordinary. Tawdry Tales of Hollywood, where he tells, his history in Hollywood. And he's got to be one of the hardest working men in Hollywood. He's done so much.
He's been on all sides of the camera at this point. Yeah. Similar to you in that regard. Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned that when Charlie pitched this idea, it was originally a remake. Is that right? When did it turn from a remake into kind of a sequel?
I believe that the first script I read was, in my recollection, it was a shot-for-shot remake. And
okay.
It evolved over time to where it became a sequel rather than a remake. And I'm so glad, because there was no reason to remake perfection. You can't duplicate that first movie. And at least with a sequel, it references the first movie. You see some clips, some flashbacks. It's the same basic plot, different characters, but same basic plot. And I was glad for that. And so it gave the sort of continuity with the first movie.
I'm glad that that's the way it went to instead of a remake, because I feel like there's something to the sequel. Obviously, there's a difference in the amount of time you had to work with, the budget you were working with between the first movie and the second movie. But I think that there is something knowing in the sequel where I felt like the entire time I was watching it, everything was purposeful. Everything was kind of winking, and I thought there are just moments in the movie where it's informed by the first movie, but it's not trying to replicate the feel necessarily. I found the tone of this one was different in a lot of ways, but in a welcome kind of way. I found the overall tone and vibe of this movie just very breezy. Like, I found it very easy to watch. I liked a lot of the performances that you got out of particularly the lead pledges. I thought that there were a lot of likable people you were working with, and everyone seemed game. Everyone seemed to be on board. And so there was just like I think we talk a lot about Charlie Band with a lot of Full Moon projects and Empire stuff. What separated those from, say, Trauma is that they were B movies with pretty cool concepts, and occasionally they would try to like stretch out into the fringes of like mainstream or respectability. And I feel like this one has such a fun, like very rooted in B movie attitude. And I love that about it. I just felt like the way the movie was carrying itself, I was smiling through a lot of it. And I will say, like, we've covered some Evil Bong. We've covered Corona Zombies. So there have been some things that we've hit on our list where I've kind of been like, all right, this isn't really our favorite so far. And I've noticed that that's been the case with some of the Kent Rodebush stuff. Some of his kind of jokes and comedy and fell a little flat in places in here. But like Steve said before, there are moments in here where I was like, this joke feels appropriate for this movie. And I
Mhm.
felt like I didn't roll my eyes at the jokes, even when they sort of went lowbrow at times, because it just felt right for this movie. With
Yeah.
Corona Zombies and Evil Bong, I don't know if it is maybe the how should I say this, like quantity of those kind of jokes. But here it was just so much more welcome, and I had so much
Mhm.
more fun with it because Steve and I, unfortunately, admittedly on mic with Corona Zombies and Evil Bong, they're more not two of our favorites, but he
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
redeemed
hey,
himself here a bit with that.
hey,
With this one.
they're not all gonna knock out of the park. But I love that you got to keep excuse me. I love that you got to keep kind of the monkey's paw element of the imp, where he comes out and he's going to very literally grant your wishes. And the way that you visualize some of these were so funny to me. The kid who wanted to be a famous rapper and turns into a dancing, screaming candy bar that gets eaten.
Yeah.
I was cackling at that. That one was
Thank
so funny
you.
to me.
I'm-
It's yeah.
I'm so glad because we didn't have a lot of money for fancy special effects, and we just had to do stuff that we could fit into the budget. And I have to say, I was so blessed by my wonderful cast. They came from all over. Some came from Los Angeles, Chicago. Glory came from Texas, and they were great. These people were so well rehearsed. And Rhonda, you interviewed pretty much all of them for, was it Medium Chill and
It was, yeah.
Expectation Nation? I hope they enjoyed the experience.
I did. I obviously that's one of the things I noticed too about Babes too. Serious time was spent on the casting. It wasn't just like, all right, I've got 3 friends and we got to get to my backyard stat. And nothing wrong with those films. I enjoy those too. But for Babes too, a lot of time and care and vision was clearly executed in the casting of this film. And all of the hot cast, let's just say it, the hot cast, Brink pulls out a really good performance from all of them. And I still can see it in a recent rewatch of Babes too. I was like, wow, she really did get this entire cast. Some people who I've never seen in anything else before or since yet.
Still early. Yeah.
Yeah. They're I have a feeling some of them are going to go on to do really great things. I can tell. I interviewed them for Medium Chill. That's my zine, and Exploitation Nation, which is Mike Watt's zine magazine. But
oh, don't worry, we're in our 40s too. We get it. We're
okay.
Thank
goodness. So like they're articulate and they have goals and visions, and it was just such a joy to like interview all of them with all of their plans. And I'm like, yeah, they're going places. They'll get whatever they want. Go for it. And it's nice to watch all that unfold too on Babes too.
That was my favorite part, was directing the actors, because at one point the cameraman, like on day one, the cameraman comes up to me and says, so do you want to use a 65 or an 80 for this next shot? And I look at him blankly, and and I found out later he's talking about lenses and what the difference is. But I really enjoyed directing the actors because that's where my forte is, being an actor myself. So I would be in the same room with them. I would sit cross-legged on the floor under the camera with a script. And if they needed a line, I'd give them a line and all that. Whereas usually the director sits in another room in Video Village watching a monitor. And I was invited to do that, but it just felt too separated from my people. And I really wanted to be in the same room with them and just be there for them. And I think that comes through. And then they were just so well rehearsed. I got very lucky with that cast.
Well, it must have felt really good and safe for especially like the young ladies in the cast too, just like having a female director kind of overseeing it. Because, I think some actresses might get a little scared by sort of B-movie content like this. So it must be nice to have an experienced female director who's been in their position kind of guiding this and making them feel safe.
I honestly think that's one of the main reasons they hired me, because Billy Butler, besides being an excellent producer, also directed a lot of movies for Charlie recently. And he would have directed this one. But on day one, I had 2 shower scenes and a love scene. And none of the guys really felt comfortable doing that. So they're like, let Brink do it.
Yeah.
So, and it's obviously an homage to the 80s where shower scenes were kind of required in movies or some sort of toplessness or whatever.
Well, I would be remiss to ask this question then. Slumber Party Massacre, Amy Holden Jones, director, very famous shower scene in that movie with a lot of actresses in that gym shower. Was it something that did that aspect make that filming of that scene more comfortable for you? Because that was early, obviously, in your career, and you have, I mean, a movie in that case written by a female writer also. But we all know that like Amy Holden Jones is directing, but again, it's a Roger Corman production, so they definitely want a certain amount of a TNA. But did you find it having Amy directing that movie make you more comfortable in that initial scene?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Slumber Party Massacre was my very first feature film. I had only done one short film before that. And I didn't realize at the time how rare and wonderful it was to have a female director and a female writer. I would never see that again until last week when I shot Mary Day and the Screen Queens, which also had a female writer and director, Jennifer Moriarty. So Amy directed like a guy, because Corman had given her a chance, and he was really good about that, about giving people chances. So she directed like a guy, more nudity, more breast, whatever. And at our very first meeting, she told all of the girls that you're going to have to do nudity. And everybody agreed, so they got hired. And then when the day came to shoot that shower scene, the women just rebelled, and they put like black masking tape over their breasts so that they couldn't be filmed on camera. They were fine with their butts, but they didn't want their breasts showing. So that was very frustrating for Amy. And I felt bad, because if you say you're going to do something like nudity, then you need to do it. And a lot of the girls didn't. So, yeah, and it's funny, in Slumber Party, my butt is the opening shot. And later when I did Psycho 3, I was a body double for Diana Scarwood. And my next door neighbor said, "Was that you going into the bathtub?" He said, "I'd recognize that butt anywhere." So it's great. My next door neighbor recognizes my butt on film.
I was going to say, after 1982, a lot of people could probably pick you and Michelle Michaels out of a lineup for how much time the camera spends on.
Yeah, I had no problem with the nudity, because I came from San Diego, and there's a very famous nude beach there, Black's Beach, which I went to on weekends. And nudity never bothered me. So I was the one that would always do the nude shower girl extras in movies. I was in The Man Who Wasn't There and Fatal Games and so many of those. And that's how I met Linnea and Michelle. They were also nude shower extras. And the nudity really catapulted us into recognition, and I think our fame. And here, 40 years later, we're still being honored. We've started getting Lifetime Achievement Awards and stuff. And it's been a very enduring career. So it was like those early movies cemented our memory, and burned it into the fans' brains. And I did a Cinema Wasteland, I think you were there, Rhonda, where they had a Slumber Party Massacre reunion. And every person who came to the table that was of a certain age had a story about when they first saw it. Like, oh, I was 14 years old and my older brother rented it. Or I was 8 years old and my babysitter let me watch it. And it just burned itself into their brains. So we
Frank is in this. I have to rent it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask, because I wanted to ask that question. I got us on the topic of Slumber Party Massacre. I'll bring us back to, Rhonda, I really like your moniker here of just Babes 2. It just rolls off the tongue. So I'll get us back to Babes 2. Now, you were talking, Brink, about being on set in the same room, directing there. I'm curious about not the pledges themselves, but the two sorority sisters, Sarah and Tiffany. The actresses who play them, Jessie Gill and Katie O'Neill. Jessie Gill, especially as Sarah, to me is a really funny performance. And I was curious if were the acting choices that she was doing something that you were suggesting, or was that sort of how she saw the character and just kind of organically went there? Because some of her line deliveries are really funny, and the way that she carries herself in the movie is just a very fun presence, and she kind of jumped out to me right away in the movie. So I was curious how much of that was conscious that she came to it because you said they were prepared, or did you kind of guide her into giving the character that attitude?
I had a lot of say in the auditions. The casting director narrowed down like 400 auditions to maybe 80, and then I got to watch them and do my picks. And Jessie Gill was so good in her audition. She kind of captured that character. And I said, she's the one I want on this. And ditto with Katie O'Neill, whose audition was just perfect. Whatever scene they gave her, she nailed it. So when Jessie Gill came to the set, she was pretty much already fully formed in that character. And there were only a few times when I said, you need to slow that line down and emphasize this word because that's the joke, things like that. And she'd go, oh, right, I get it. Okay. So again, it's just a wonderful cast. And Katie O'Neill was so funny as the sidekick. I just loved working with her.
Yeah, they were such a good like queen bee and second in command. Like you understood their rank, just seeing
and
them
they
there.
never met. None of these people had ever met before the movie started. Jessie came from Los Angeles, as did Audrey Neal, and Katie came from Chicago. So, it's just all these people came from very diverse parts of the country and met for the first time. And we did a lot of rehearsals, a lot of blocking. I was very insistent about that. Come on, let's block this scene. Let's rehearse it. And for the most part, they were very obedient children, except for that one night they all went out and got drunk.
Oh, no.
About halfway through the movie. And they were green in the gills the next day. So it was, I finally found out what had happened. And, as mom, I'm always like, well, go home, get some sleep, study your lines. And then they go out drinking and come back sick.
And Brink, you mentioned that Rhonda had, come to Cleveland and visited the set. Rhonda, do you remember when you visited the set? Any like specific scenes that you were there for, or anything that you noticed? So what was your experience on Babes 2, from the outside looking in?
It really was initially from the outside looking in. I was there and I first arrived on a very quiet day, like right before the actors had arrived, like before they descended upon that set. I was able to, get the grand tour of Full Moon Manor. I was mostly just awestruck at it all. And what really sticks out for me is it was just full-blown, full circle synchronicity. Here I was on the set of Babes 2 with Brink and the effects maestro, Greg Leitner, who did recreate beautifully an imp. I was able to hold it and take pictures. That is literally my the picture you see on my phone when you log in. So it was one of those epic moments where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. And then, seeing the sets before they were in action, I believe Butler had a lot to do with all that design. It just popped. And I knew that this was going to be a lot of fun. Was it going to be Babes 1? No, it was going to be Babes 2. And, with like Brink behind it, I knew, I didn't know how it was going to unfold exactly, but I knew it was going to unfold well. So getting that big tour and hearing about the people before they arrived was just magical in and of itself. And then being able to interview them all afterwards, I really couldn't have planned it any better as a fangirl if I, asked for something specific. And then getting into even being able to see the legendary Dickie Lanes in Cleveland was, again, I have to say, magical.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to say something about the bowling alley. It looks nothing like the bowling alley in the first movie, and it's supposed to be, I guess, the same bowling alley, except
Mhm.
the first one was in LA and the second one was in Cleveland. But that week we were shooting, there happened to be a bowling tournament in Cleveland, and every single bowling alley was booked. We couldn't find one. So finally, we find this little Dickey Lanes, which was perfect for our needs, but it looks nothing like the first movie. But the guy that owns it was really sweet and, let us shoot as long as we needed to and took good care of us. We were lucky to get it.
Oh, that's awesome.
I've mentioned on Mike that old bowling alley interior is one of my favorite aesthetics, and this one had enough of that for me. It's like
Yeah.
one of the few places where you can kind of go now where they haven't really, a lot of them haven't updated, their flooring, their carpeting, their decor. And I love that because I can walk into a bowling alley and if I'm not looking at a group of people using their phones, I can kind of be transported back to another time a little bit. And speaking of being transported back, I don't know how much your careers have crossed paths, Brink, compared to Michelle Bauer or Linnea Quigley. But, we've talked for a little bit about this movie without talking about Kelly Maroney.
Right.
And, how I'm curious how she got involved because, I mean, this is me just also talking about some of my favorite movies, and Night of the Comet is one of my favorite movies of all time also. I don't have it on a shirt though. So I feel like I should
That
either
is shocking.
get that on a shirt or I should just sign out of this meeting and let you guys finish without
And
me.
I clearly need to check for the soundtrack. I don't think I have that one. I'm devastated at this point.
I'll toss in my own embarrassing admission. I have not seen that movie. That's been on my list forever. I have not gotten to it, but now I'm motivated because I thought Kelly Maroney was really fun in this movie. I know. So I understand, right? Her character was originally written to be Linnea, correct? And
Yes.
She was returning, and then she wasn't able to make it.
So when we saw the script, when I saw it, Michelle and I come back as ghosts in the bowling alley, and Linnea was supposed to be the house mother at the sorority. So Billy approached her, and her agent said no, and they raised the price, the fee they were offering, and the agent still said no, and kept saying no, and finally, just Billy said, we just can't do it. She won't come to terms with us. And I personally was a little disappointed because it was my directing debut of a feature film. And had the roles been reversed, I would have said to Linnea, yes, of course, I'll support you. I'll be there for you. So it was a little, difficult, but I'm sure she had her reasons. Then weirdly, ironically, 1 week before we began shooting, Linnea fell and broke her kneecap at her.
Oh no.
Yeah, she tripped in the garage and she had this huge leg brace on her leg and was in tremendous pain and couldn't travel. So even if we had hired her, she wouldn't have made it.
Oh,
it was like the gods were looking out for us. So Kelly, Billy said, who else do we know that is blonde and small, like Linnea, because she's so tiny. And we all love Night of the Comet and Chopping Mall. And he came up with Kelly Maroney. So I said, great, perfect, get her. Kelly also said no.
Oh, no.
Yes, I know. And so they kept raising the money that they were offering her. And finally she said yes. So they made her Spider's sister. And we changed the script to say that Spider, a lifetime criminal, was now in jail.
Making license plates.
Making license plates.
Yes. We couldn't, have her in the movie that way. So that was the story of that. It was very strange, but I thought that Kelly did a wonderful job and, was right there when we needed her.
She was a lot of fun. I loved all the jokes about the name, like who kind of, what kind of name is Snake? A cool fucking name, like I thought that was so funny. Like, it's like, yeah, all right. No, show me that. And I another big laugh line for me was when I realized what the name Bitsy was referring to. And I'm just like, oh my God. Okay. That's so good. That's so good. That was really good.
Yeah.
Really funny.
Well, yes. And supposedly she's Itsy Bitsy Spider. She's
right.
the daughter, but Gloria's Hispanic from Texas. So I added a line to the script. I said, you've got to say, or Kelly has to say, you look just like your father. Yeah. I try to save it that way.
Yep. No one needs to ask any more questions. That's it.
Yeah.
It just looks like her father. We don't need to have any other information.
Yeah.
No, but she's a lot of fun, and it's always a welcome presence to see her and things. And like you said, Steve, with the name Bitsy, it took me a while too. It wasn't until the reveal at the end, and I had the same moment where I went, "Oh, okay, like now I get it." And I thought that's clever, and I thought there was some clever stuff. And I will say, one thing that I found that made me laugh, that I texted Steve off mic, that I enjoyed about this one too, is that not only is it a different imp physically than the imp in the first movie, because that one deteriorated, but it's a different imp sort of in attitude in some ways. Like the voice is similar, the mannerisms are similar. Obviously there's like a monkey's paw, Willy Wonka type quality to the imp, but I loved it. To me, I felt like in the first movie, the imp leans into puns a lot. Now, there are puns here, obviously, like I want to be a famous rapper, or I want money out the ass, stuff like that. And I will say, I don't laugh at bathroom humor in movies very often, but when I saw where that joke was going, I chuckled a little bit. But the thing that got me, and I think I liked this so much about this version of the imp, is that sometimes instead of making a pun, he just cursed. So there's a couple of moments where like the imp in the first movie would have said something that would have been a joke, and here the imp just says "fuck you," and I'm like, that's got me laughing.
When Rhonda was saying that she got to like see the puppet in real life, I had a thought of like, when people meet Muppets on like Sesame Street or something like that, the puppeteers stay in character, and I'm like, oh, I hope the imp stayed in character. It's just like, oh, I'm such a big fan. Fuck you.
I have photos of Rhonda kissing the imp.
That was just for us, man. He is like the epitome of the bratty teenager. So when you find out, where the imp comes from, you're like, well, that F-bomb made sense now. And you're right, Steve. You're right. I don't want to say that I made fun of my editor for Exploitation Nation, and I'm so sorry, Mike, but when he first told me that he was able to hold one of the original Muppets, I'm like, oh, that's cute. What's the big deal? Then he explained to me what the Muppets meant and what it be, and I realized, oh my God, his love of the Muppets, this endearment, this attachment, that's how I feel about this ridiculous imp. So when I was able to hold Greg's creation, that's when I said, I understand what Mike Watt felt now. I get it. It was very much like that. You get it too, Steve. I'm so glad.
I get it. Oh no, if I were to meet Kermit the Frog, I would freak out, and I know I'm an educated man. I'm aware it is just a puppet on a hand, but I would still treat it like a celebrity because he meant a lot. Yeah.
As an educated woman, I'm like, this is just a puppet, Rhonda. It's not even the original puppet. But when you spend so much time with an imaginary creature as a child, and it's now here in front of you as an adult, it taps into that like very your psyche, your core, whatever it is. And yeah, there's a lot of pictures of high-fiving the imp and holding the imp and smooching the imp, and
love it.
Yeah. It's a flip book of images with me with the imp, essentially.
That's really funny.
There amazing. Was a Jim Henson exhibit in a museum here in the city that had all of these amazing artifacts a few years back. And I went to that exhibit and I was walking through, and there was a Kermit puppet propped up on this thing. And I had a moment where I kind of like looked at it and got surprisingly emotional. Again, it's just a puppet, but like it's really not, because you invest so much time, like you said. And I'm thinking like, we've talked about Ghoulies 1 and Ghoulies 2 so far on the show, and Ghoulies 2, a lot of fun. Ghoulies 1, not one of our favorites actually of the Charles Band movies, but if someone was to say, hey, check this out, I have this original John Carl Buechler fish ghoulie that was used, and would held it up in front of me, I would have the same reaction where I would be like, I have to hold this, I have to see what it feels like. It's tactile. I need to see how slimy it is. Like I need to know all of those things. So that's one of my favorite things about like diving deep into B movies and low budget movies and exploitation movies is because a lot of us develop our relationships with these things back when there is no sort of class system. Like a movie is just a movie. You don't know about A movies, B movies, things like that. So you kind of you might get an attachment to something that is, out on the fringes, but it means a lot to you. And we've had so many great conversations with people who've said, oh, this movie is really important to me. Like Rhonda, you're the first person who've professed this much love for Babes 1. And that's amazing. And we're glad that you were able to be here to talk about it someone to give you an outlet to kind of gush about this thing that means so much to you. And I just find that and it's great to see the same actors and producers and directors constantly working within this medium and supporting each other and stuff, because I find it to be so rewarding to embrace these relationships that I've fostered with this kind of content throughout the years. And I feel like the same is with Steve and with all the people who listen to the show too. So it's great to hear, your little freak out session.
It is about the people. You're right. And having met and interviewed most of the living cast of Sorority Babes 1, and including Brink over the years, many of those people I've remained friends with. They were very kind when I first met them. They've been nothing but supportive of any of the writing I do. And over all these years, having maintained some of these relationships, it was amazing to then get to the set of Babes 2, where Brink said, hey, Billy's going to join us for dinner. Is that all right? Is that all right? Of course it's all right.
I insist.
And Charlie said, it's okay if you tour the house. I'm like, I will do whatever Charlie says, So it was nice that even all these years later on the set of Babes 2, and then the young cast being open to being just excited to be interviewed, it was like, wow, these really are my people. The Babes 1, Babes 2. This is, I'm home.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool to hear. That's so we'll kind of you've both been so incredibly generous with your time so far. People were not aware we had a long technical delay leading into it, and everyone was just so incredibly patient.
Fine,
so
just throw me under the bus.
I will throw your ISP under the bus. Yes, but I blame the infrastructure of New York City. But no, so I did just want to give you both a chance to tell us about anything you have coming up, anything that you're excited about, anything else that you're working on, and just thank you again for being here. It's so cool to be able to talk to both of you about this whole experience.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've had an amazingly busy year. I recently shot a film called Kemper, which is a true crime story about a serial killer back in the early 70s.
Oh, Edmund Kemper, right? Yeah. Yeah. I remember reading about him.
I played his eighth and last victim, Sally Hallett, who was also his mother's best friend. So I got to wear period costumes, and I drove a 73 Jaguar E-Type. Loved the movie cars. And that was really good. I'm looking forward to that. And then I just recently finished shooting Mary Day and the Screen Queens, which was the one directed and written by Jennifer Moriarty. I'm starring with Michelle Bauer and Lisa London. And it's a really fun, it's kind of a riff on Mary Kay, where this pretty young woman comes door to door selling cosmetics, except she's escaped from an insane asylum, and she's actually a serial killer.
I always assumed that was the case with most Mary Kay representatives.
Yeah, well, that's why we call it Mary Day, because we don't want Mary Kay to sue them.
Hey, parody laws. It's all safe. It's all safe. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Those sound amazing. And how about you, Rhonda? Do you have anything coming up that you'd like to direct people towards?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a small role coming up. I wanted to save this. I wanted to share it with Brink too. In a friend of mine who also writes for Medium Chill, but he's also a director of his own low budget series of films, Creepy Clown. Those are with K's. Creepy Clown versus Amityville Sasquatch. I am the Reverend Dr. Charlene Gray Green in this film. So I shoot my role next week, essentially, for this. And other than that, I have Medium Chill issue 9 underway and this lovely issue of Girls on Film coming out. I found these two amazing young women who are the editors of Girls on Film, who, again, as soon as I met them, I'm like, these are my people. And they let me even choose my own movies as I write for them. So I'm extremely honored to work with all of those people. It's been such a good time.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I love those titles. I love that character name. That sounds incredibly fun.
Yeah, this just sounds like a great title and a great character name. And it already, without even being filmed, it has made its way into the pantheon of great movie titles. And we just got so many fun ones. Just looking, you were mentioning before about Charlie Band being obviously so prolific and still working, and I just whenever I pull up our spreadsheet, it's like there's stuff on there that neither of us have ever heard of or seen, but a lot of them are pretty hilarious in terms of titles and stuff. But the thing is, our spreadsheet is going to keep growing because there's all this midnight or pulp noir stuff that he's doing now, where like those movies are going to be available for streaming, and like we haven't even added those to the spreadsheet. And so like by the time this episode comes out and we update the spreadsheet, there's probably going to be 15 more Charlie Band movies for us to talk about. And so
I hope so.
Yeah, there's no shortage of stuff for us, and the podcast is definitely evergreen in that way. So I'm sure that if you check out any of these movies with these amazing titles, you're going to love them. If you like what we do, you can jump onto Apple Podcasts or Spotify and drop us a little 5-star rating, maybe a little brief review if you feel so inclined to do so. If you want to keep up with the show, with what we're doing, the best way to follow us is on Instagram. You can follow the show at puppetmasters_castlefreaks, or myself at _Giallo_Jerry, or Steve at Minotaur Matador. We do post about the show on X, and we do upload the episodes to YouTube. There might be some posts on Blue Sky or Threads in the future, but we kind of haven't really been using those as a way to do it, but we are very easily accessible. We are, however, not the only show that Steve feels the need to plug right now. Steve, what else have you got going on?
Well, I'm also the host of a show called Cinema Arcade. That is cinema and arcade mashed together, because that is what we do. We are watching movies and then playing the video games based on those movies to see how they contrast, compare, detract, or just plain weird artifacts. So we've got a million of them out there right now. We've got a series that we're wrapping up this week on Jumanji, which would have been like weeks ago by the time you're hearing this. So who knows what's going on over there? Lots of fun stuff, lots of fun guests. So definitely check that out. And be sure to check us out next week, because we are going to be talking about the movie that Charles Band considers his very first movie. Now, there is one that predates this that he has kind of softly disowned, but the one that he considers his very first movie as a producer is Mansions of the Doomed. This is from 1974. I'm excited to check this out. I am not familiar with what this one is about, but I know this was an early minor success for Charles Band that kind of helped launch his career. So we're excited to be getting back into it and to be going back to the 70s. I always have fun with our 70s output.
Yeah, this is one that kicked off. It was like this, and then Crash, Laser Blast brought him into Tourist Trap. So this is kind of the first catalyst in what would get him, and then Cinderella and Fairy Tales, which you guys heard about a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Anyway, thank you again to both Rhonda Baughman and the wonderful Brinke Stevens for taking the time to join us and talk about Babes 2. That's a pleasure. Thank you. Vernacular, it's Babes 2.
It was an honor to be here with all of you. Thank you.
It's such a pleasure for us. So thank you both so much.
All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed listening to our episode on Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama 2. We will see you next week for Mansion of the Doomed. Stay tuned.